President Donald Trump is losing patience with the ongoing war in Ukraine. He promised to end the conflict within 24 hours of taking office, but months later, the fighting rages on. Trump now believes diplomacy has failed and is ready for decisive action. His frustration stems from the war's destabilizing effect on Europe and its threat to American interests. Trump sees himself as the only leader capable of forcing an end to the bloodshed. Recent White House statements show Trump is done waiting for Putin to act. This marks a dramatic shift from previous administrations' cautious approaches. Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, has tried to broker a deal in Moscow, but talks have stalled. Now Trump is issuing direct threats demanding Russia withdraw its troops from Ukraine. This is not a request, it's an ultimatum. Trump believes only immense pressure will force Putin to reconsider. The world is watching to see if this bold move brings peace or sparks greater escalation. The coming days will determine the future of the conflict and regional stability. Trump has set a hard deadline for Putin, August 8, 2025, to agree to a ceasefire and start withdrawing from Ukraine. If Russia fails to comply, Trump threatens 100% secondary tariffs on any nation trading with Russia. Unlike previous sanctions, these tariffs target third-party countries, forcing them to choose between Russia and the U.S. The goal: isolate Russia completely and cut off its war funding. To prove he's serious, Trump already doubled tariffs on Indian imports after India continued buying Russian oil. This move signals that the U.S. will penalize even its partners to achieve its aims. The proposed tariffs would devastate Russia's economy, targeting its vital energy exports. Trump's strategy is to make the war too costly for Putin to continue, but this approach risks harming the U.S. and its allies, potentially triggering a global trade war. The stakes are enormous: economic pain for Russia, but also for the world. Trump is betting that the threat of economic collapse will force Putin's hand. The deadline is fast approaching and the world is bracing for the fallout. The next move could reshape the global order. The war in Ukraine began in February 2022, when Russia invaded under the pretext of security concerns. Russia's attempt to seize Kiev failed, and the conflict shifted to a brutal stalemate in the east and south. The front line stretches over 1,000 kilometers, with neither side able to break through. Russia controls about 20% of Ukraine, including Crimea and parts of 4 other regions. Ukraine's resistance has been fierce, but the cost is staggering. The conflict's roots go back decades, with broken promises and shifting alliances. Russia's invasion, meant to halt NATO expansion, instead pushed Finland and Sweden to join. The war has become a daily grind of attrition, with trenches, drones, and relentless shelling. Hopes for a quick resolution have faded, replaced by the reality of a protracted, devastating conflict. The stalemate has created a humanitarian crisis and threatens European security. Peace is blocked by irreconcilable demands from Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. Putin insists Ukraine remain neutral, demilitarized, and cede Crimea and other regions to Russia. Ukraine refuses to surrender any territory and demands security guarantees from the West. For Kiev, giving up land is unthinkable, a betrayal of those who died defending it. Trump's priority is ending the war quickly and stopping U.S. aid, even if it means telling Ukraine to abandon NATO ambitions. He offers Putin a deal: Ukrainian neutrality in exchange for Russian withdrawal. This transactional approach clashes with both Ukraine's and NATO's positions. Putin refuses to meet Zelensky, calling him illegitimate, a claim Trump has echoed. With both sides entrenched, there's little room for compromise. The deadlock over territory and sovereignty has stalled all peace efforts. The diplomatic divide remains unbridgeable. The war's human toll is staggering. Over 13,500 civilians killed, with the real number likely much higher. Military losses are catastrophic. Ukraine has lost tens of thousands of soldiers, Russia even more. Cities like Mariupol and Bakhmut lie in ruins and Ukraine's economy is shattered. 20% of Ukraine's territory is occupied, crippling its industry and agriculture. The damage to infrastructure is in the hundreds of billions. Ukraine relies on Western aid to survive. Russia's economy, though resilient, is strained by sanctions and massive military spending. The loss of a generation of young men will haunt both nations for decades. The war's economic and demographic consequences are profound and long-lasting. The cost of conflict extends far beyond the battlefield. In negotiations, Putin uses psychological tactics to unsettle his opponents. During a recent meeting with Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff, Putin presented a Soviet medal meant for a senior CIA official, Julian Galina. The gesture referenced Galina's son, who died fighting for Russia, a calculated move to embarrass the US. Putin's aim-sow discord and Project Power by exploiting personal tragedy. This is classic Putin, using information and emotional manipulation as weapons. By highlighting the death of an American fighting for Russia, he tries to paint the US as divided. The White House and CIA refuse to comment, refusing to play into Putin's game. These psychological maneuvers complicate diplomacy, making negotiations even more fraught. Putin sees the conflict as an existential struggle with the West, using every tool at his disposal. For US negotiators, it's not just about policy, it's personal. The psychological warfare raises the stakes and deepens mistrust. Diplomacy with Putin is a battle of nerves as much as strategy. Trump's ultimatum is a high-risk diplomatic gamble. By setting a hard deadline and threatening massive tariffs, he's raised the stakes far beyond previous administrations. Past leaders relied on gradual sanctions and coalition building. Trump is going it alone. He believes a crisis will force a resolution, betting that unbearable pressure will make Putin fold. A Trump-Putin summit in Alaska is reportedly in the works, aiming for a dramatic breakthrough. But the risks are huge. Putin may refuse to back down, seeing retreat as weakness. If Putin calls Trump's bluff, Trump must either follow through, risking global economic chaos, or back down and lose credibility. This approach could alienate US allies who resent being forced to choose sides. Broad tariffs could spark a trade war with not just Russia's partners, but America's friends. The Western coalition could fracture, handing Putin a strategic win even if Russia suffers economically. Trump's strategy is bold, but the consequences could be unpredictable and far-reaching. The world is watching to see if this gamble pays off or backfires. Trump's threat of 100% secondary tariffs would shake the global economy. China, Russia's top trading partner, would be hit hardest, potentially triggering a global recession. India, reliant on Russian energy, has already protested US tariff hikes, calling them unfair. India is unlikely to cut ties with Russia, risking a major clash with Washington. Even US allies in Europe would suffer. The EU still trades billions with Russia. NATO ally Turkey maintains strong economic links to Moscow. Secondary tariffs could divide the NATO alliance and hurt European companies. American consumers would feel the pain as prices for imports soar, fueling inflation. Trump's strategy is to force countries to choose between the US and Russia. But China and India may resist, seeing themselves as rising powers unwilling to be dictated to. They could retaliate, fragmenting the global economy into rival blocs. The fallout could be lasting, with deep consequences for international stability. The world faces a new era of economic and diplomatic uncertainty. With Trump's August 8th deadline looming, the world stands at a crossroads. If Russia complies, a ceasefire and troop withdrawal could follow, with Trump claiming a historic victory. Ukraine would regain territory but abandon its NATO ambitions, leaving peace fragile and dependent on US-Russia relations. More likely, Putin will defy the ultimatum, betting the US won't risk a global trade war. Trump would then impose sweeping tariffs, triggering economic confrontation with China, India, and Europe. This could spark a global crisis with supply chains breaking and prices soaring. Russia and China might draw closer, forming a powerful bloc against the US. The Western alliance could fracture under the strain. For Ukraine, the war would drag on, with international support wavering. The conflict could become even more entrenched, with no diplomatic solution in sight. Trump's bold move has forced a moment of decision. The world is holding its breath to see if it leads to peace or global breakdown. The next days will shape the future of Ukraine and the world order.